I am still a hard man. Let's go. So this is Imperator of Forge. I am back. I have returned to talk about the incredibly momentous, very fast, almost momentous ascension of a new religion and a new philosophy, and indeed an entirely new way of life under the Arabian prophet Mohammed and his religion, the message of the prophet, the message of peace, Islam. I will talk about the rise and the traumatic trauma for Jews and Christians and Buddhists and pagans under the heel of the Islamic Caliphate. Join me on this journey. The Roman Empire as a political state did not just simply fall overnight. It was not because of lead poisoning. It was not because of Christianity. Christianity had been around since the first century. It was because of the bureaucracy. The state and the nature of the Roman bureaucracy and the Byzantine bureaucracy made it extremely unmanageable. Another important thing to consider is the markets of the ancient world. Unlike in modern times, there was no banks. Instead, the state itself issued currency and levied and strained gold and silver based upon state bureaucracy. What this caused was that it made it impossible to mend and to either create proper inflation and proper deflation in these ancient states. And as a result, whenever these states were not conquering and doing, imperial stuff, they basically fell into economic ruin. There was also a over-reliance on slavery. This is the real reason, along with climate change, erosion of crops and food supplies, and a disruption of trade and devaluation of currency and population, and the fall in population is the reason why the Roman Empire fell in the West and the Eastern Byzantine Empire declined. It was also impossible for the Romans to really absorb and to Romanize Oriental cultures and populations who had already existed in solidified states for thousands of years. The Egyptians, the Berbers, the Arabs, the Persians, the Babylonians, Mesopotamians, the Jews, and the Greeks all had their own distinct cultures and customs. And it was unthinkable that they could ever be fully Latinized. It just wasn't going to happen. Likewise, the barbarians of the West, the Germanic tribes and the Celts, couldn't really thoroughly be Romanized either. So that's why the Roman Empire couldn't last forever. The Byzantine Empire was far more Hellenized and Christian than its predecessor, but was still every bit bellicose and bureaucratic. The bellicose states of the Sassanids, the Han, and later the Shen dynasties in China, the Gupta Empire of India, the Byzantines, and the Sassanids were simply very old and extremely worn out with wars. And by the time that the Prophet Muhammad showed up on the scene, things were already quite bad for the nature of things. So anyways, Soulbreaker says, hold on, Total Janny Def says, can you unban Bronx, please? He said he's sorry. Well, can you show me Total Janny Death? Lost Soul says that Soulbreaker and Souls 2 Breaker 2 got banned. I'm sorry to hear that. I'll give you a mod, Soulbreaker. Sorry to hear that, bro. Yeah. Islam has had a very drastic and horrendous change throughout the entire history of the old world. Europe, Asia, and Africa were very dramatically and haphazardly changed and altered by the coming of this new religion. And the absolute speed and simplicity by which new converts and adherents were able to come. For a very long time in the early Islamic Caliphate, there was also a lot of Christians that lived under monastic life. A very large percentage of the population under Islam was Christian and as well as Jewish. And these three monotheistic lived under the protection of the Caliph. They were considered to be people of the book. There is also pagans under Islam. Hard as it is to imagine, a lot of Turkic pagans were absorbed and converted under Islam as well. The Muslims also came across Hindus and Buddhists, Berber pagans, and all sorts of crazy things. Soulbreaker, I made you a mod, bro. So anyways, the first thing that I want to talk about, I want to talk about ascetic Christian influences on early Islam. So that'll be the first thing that I'll quickly discuss. So I'm going to go over ascetic Christian influences on Islam and their impact. Christian monastic life in early Islam presents a survey of Christian monastic life under Muslim political hegemony, explores the reasons behind Muslim latitude towards and support of Christian monasteries, draws on a variety of medieval Syriac, Greek, and Arabic texts, as well as modern scholarship, shows how core spiritual values embodied in the monastic tradition helped to facilitate an ecumenical environment in the early Islamic centuries. During the rise of Islam, Muslim fascination with Christian monastic life was articulated through a fluid, piety-centered movement. Bradley Bowman explores this confessional synthesis between like-minded religious groups in the medieval Near East. He argues that this potential ecumenism would have been based upon the sharing of core tenets concerning piety and righteous behavior. Such fundamental attributes, long associated with monasticism in the East, likely served as a mutually inclusive common ground for Muslim and Christian communities of the period. This manifested itself in Muslim appreciation, interest, and at times participation in Christian monastic life. So right from the very beginning, Islam was greatly influenced by Christian monastic thought and by Christian influences. This had both successive attributes and also detriments to this new religion. For a lot of people who lived in the 7th century AD, the sudden rise and the sudden change in culture that Islam brought to the world was very exotic and very mysterious. A lot of people were very much shocked by and really taken up and surprised by just what exactly this new religion was. So, Mohammed and the origins of Islam, the life of Mohammed. Orphaned at 6, Mohammed was saved from a life of slavery by his uncle, who gave him a job in his successful caravan business. Married to a successful businesswoman in her own right, the false prophet Mohammed saw firsthand how the leading families of the Quraysh lived. They were arrogant, reckless, ungenerous, and egotistical, believed only in riches, and took no responsibility for people outside their intermediate elite circle. Muhammad saw this decline in traditional values as a threat to the very existence of his tribe. He was sure that social reform had to be based on a new spiritual foundation. Though before the revelations, he had no idea that his destiny would be to implement these changes. Less than 100 years after Muhammad's death in 632, the first Muslim historians began to write about his life. These were Muhammad ibn Ashak, who died in 767, Muhammad ibn Umar al-Waqidi, who died in 820, Muhammad ibn Sa'd died in 845, and Abu Jarir at-Tabari, who died in 923. These scholars reconstructed their narrative from oral traditions and early documents, and through their effort we know more about Muhammad than we do any other prophet. Nevertheless, we need to keep in mind that the stories of Muhammad's life were written to satisfy contemporary norms and included miraculous and legendary stories that might be misinterpreted today. As we have noted with the stories surrounding the Axal sages, the Old Testament, and the Gospels, such accounts are not to be taken literally. According to Riza Aslan in No God But God, The Origins, Evolution, and Future of Islam, they function as prophetic topos, a conventional literary theme that can be found in most mythologies, like the infancy narratives in the Gospels. These stories are not intended to relate historical events, but to elucidate the mystery of the prophetic experience. They answer the questions: what does it mean to be a prophet? Is it not important whether the stories describing the childhood of Muhammad, Jesus, or David are true? What is important is what these stories say about our prophets, our messiahs, our kings, that theirs is a holy and eternal vocation, established by God from the moment of creation. According to tradition, Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570, the year known as the Year of the Elephant, in which Mecca was miraculously saved. Tradition tells that Abraha, the Abyssinian Christian ruler of Yemen, attacked Mecca with a herd of elephants imported from Africa. Abraha's goal was to destroy the Kaaba and make the Christian church at Sana'a the new religious center of the Arab world. The terrified Quraysh had never seen an elephant, much less a whole herd, so they ran to the mountains to escape, leaving the Kaaba with no defense. But just as it was about to be attacked, the sky went dark as a flock of birds, each carrying a stone in its beak, rained down on the invading army, which was forced to retreat. Many stories surrounding his childhood and birth, which was announced in a tale similar to the Christian story of Mary, Mohammed's mother, a widow named Amina. Amina one day heard a voice say to her, "You carry in your womb the Lord of this people, and when he is born, say, I place him beneath the protection of the One, from the evil of every envious person. Then name him Mohammed." In Mohammed, the world changer, Mohammed Jabara, historian and scholar of Semitic languages, provides a different account of Mohammed's life in early years, culled from extensive research from original sources. Keep in mind that, in common with other Semitic languages, Arabic words are mostly constructed from 3 or 4 letter roots, each root providing the core meaning. Jabara's findings indicate that the name Mohammed was given to him by his grandfather, Abd al-Muttalib. Abd al-Muttalib, the son of a Jewish mother and a father he didn't remember, chose to name with an archaic Semitic root, MHMD, not commonly used in Mecca, that meant the exemplary one, so that his example would be exalted in the highest places, and his name would come to be known among the nations. The root HMD, Jabara notes, describes someone standing on an elevated platform who demonstrates actions to be emulated by onlookers. The prefix M that starts the name transformed the root action described from something finite to something timeless. Mohammed describes a constant state of doing, perpetually inspiring others to emulate his example. Mohammed was orphaned at the age of 6 when his mother died. Jabara writes movingly that her last words to her son were Kun Rajula, meaning be a world changer. Mohammed went to live with his grandmother Abd al-Muttalib, who was with his grandfather Abd al-Muttalib, who was in charge of providing the water from the Zamzam well to pilgrims. Abd al-Muttalib, who had suffered the loss of his favorite son, Muhammad's father, took the young child under his wing. He taught his grandson the Arabic language in great detail, including how to present arguments effectively. During his time with his grandfather, Muhammad learned about slavery, a practice he abhorred. He took steps to immediately release his slave, Baraka, who had been with him since his birth. She was overjoyed, but chose to remain by his side, and was one of his closest followers throughout his life. But by the time he was 8 years old, his grandfather too had died. Fortunately, his uncle Abu Talib saved the young Mohammed from a life of slavery or indebtedness experienced by so many orphans at the time. He employed him in his successful caravan business, In a story that resembles that of Samuel in the Old Testament and others of that genre, it was on a trading expedition to Syria when Muhammad was only 9 years old that a Christian monk named Bahara recognized him as the message of the Lord of the worlds. As a young man, Muhammad befriended a like-minded youth, 3 years his junior, named Atik, whom he later named Abu Bakr. Muhammad had an acute sense of social justice, and even as a youth, he stood up to some powerful men in Meccan society, earning his enmity. Muhammad, with a group of friends and an older mentor, established a pact known as Halfa ul Fudhul, the pact to enhance society's honor, to protect vulnerable vendors from abusive Meccan elders, and to ensure honest financial dealings. They pledged to act to uphold the right of anyone who is wronged. At 25, when Muhammad was still unmarried and dependent on his uncle, he met a very distant cousin, Khadija, a beautiful widow, then probably 28, as calculated by Jabara. Khadija was unusual for a woman of her time. She was a respected member of Meccan society and a very successful businesswoman in her own right. In spite of his tenuous social circumstances, according to Ibn Hisham, Muhammad had a reputation of truthfulness, reliability, and nobility of character, and Khadija entrusted him to take a caravan of goods to Syria and sell it. When he returned home with more profits than she anticipated, she sent 2 confidants to check him out. Both confidants gave her extremely favorable reports on his character and acumen. She then proposed marriage to him, and he accepted, thus acquiring status and entry into Meccan society. Khadija gifted him a slave of hers, Zad, whom Muhammad promptly freed. Zayed, whom Muhammad promptly freed. Zayed, free to leave, chose to live with Muhammad, who adopted him as his son. Although polygamy was the norm at the time, Muhammad and Khadija were in a monogamous marriage for 25 years until her death. They had 6 children. As an orphan himself, Muhammad would have been aware of just how easy it was to fall outside Mecca's religio-economic system. With his marriage and his business doing well, he now had access to a prosperous life. He saw firsthand that although the leading families of the Quraysh believed in the one God, this belief was not relevant to their lives. They had forgotten that everything depended on him. Now that they were rich, they adhered to the very worst aspects of Morawa, and they had thrown away the best. They were arrogant, reckless, ungenerous, and egotistical. They had become self-centered, no longer believing in anything but riches, and took no responsibility for people outside their immediate elite circle. Muhammad saw the decline in traditional values as a threat to the very existence of his tribe. He was sure that social reform had to be based on a new spiritual foundation for it to actually take effect. As a trader, Muhammad came in frequent contact with Jews and Christians. According to the scholar Akbal Ali Shah, Muhammad made an exhaustive study of other religions. He was aware that his own people, although they believed in all law lacked a sacred book of their own. The people of the book had codified laws and were both religious and social, governing their behavior from dawn to dusk. His own people had no such thing, and because of this, their lives were in chaos. Many were suffering and destitute, and the whole tribe was in danger of extinction. Before the revelations, he had no idea that his destiny would be to implement these vital changes. He was of a minor clan, the Hashem, and scholars point out that, in common with other prophets before him, he initially wanted nothing to do with what was happening to him and was extremely upset. So much so that without Khadija's intervention, Mohammed may have gone through with his plan to end it all, and history would have turned out differently, writes Riza Aslan. All right, give me a second here. So, anyways, I hope that you're all enjoying what I've been talking about so far. As I go through the lives of one of the most controversial historical figures, at least in the West, and one of the most praised political and religious leaders in Asia, the Prophet Muhammad. Dun dun dun! Muhammad, a brief biography. Muhammad, the founder of the Islamic religion, Arab prophet, and monotheism preacher. Allah, through a faithful angel Gabriel, sent to Muhammad revelations, which were eventually recorded as scripture, Al-Quran, or the Quran. Muhammad is one of the central characters of the Islamic religion, so considering a brief biography of this prophet can benefit those who want to get to know Islam more closely. The birth and adulthood of Muhammad. The future prophet was born 22nd April 571 of the year. Despite the fact that Muhammad belonged to a noble family, his dad, Abdullah, was a rather poor person and made a living reselling goods. The boy never saw his father, since he died before his birth. Muhammad's mother died when he was only 6 years old, so at first he was brought up by his grandmother. For some time the boy was taken home by his uncle Abu Taliban, who instilled in him a love of good deeds and work. From early childhood, Muhammad helped his uncle work to pass livestock belonging to rich families and collected berries in the desert. From 12 years old, Muhammad begins to be interested in issues of a religious topic. At the same time, he and his uncle travel to Syria, in which he gets acquainted with all kinds of religious movements of the time, Judaism and Christianity. Returning home, Muhammad continues to work hard, but religious issues did not leave the young man. At age 20, he enters the service of the rich widowed woman Khadijah as a clerk. Fulfilling various tasks, the young man travels a lot around the country and at the same time gets acquainted with the local customs and beliefs of the population. Despite the fact that Khadijah was much older than Muhammad, they fell in love with each other and soon legalized their relationship through marriage. This union brought Muhammad not only happiness and prosperity, he was able to devote more free time to search for spiritual values. Practicing activities of Muhammad. Muhammad loved from time to time to go away from the bustle of the city to dive into reflection and meditation. Desert gorges served as their favorite place of solitude. Once, when Muhammad was in a mountain cave, Hira, the archangel Gabriel appeared to him and passed first revelations, ordered to remember them and pass them on to other people. Also, in a conversation with him, the angel called Muhammad the messenger of Allah. After this event, Muhammad began his preaching activities. He told his compatriots about the commandments of Allah, that he is the only true God, about the upcoming judgment of God. Muhammad encouraged people to change and keep the commandments of Allah in order to avoid Armageddon. Unfortunately, there were fellow followers of Muhammad in his hometown, and representatives of the authorities saw a certain threat in his activities. So they staged a threat against him. In order to heat up the situation, Muhammad moved with his followers to Medina, where the first Islamic community was founded. Over time, the creeds of Muhammad nevertheless spread throughout the surrounding cities, despite the obstacle of the authorities. By 630, he could return to Mecca, in which there were already a large number of his students. He devoted much time to preaching, sacrificed, destroyed a large number of idols. He also destroyed a large number of idols and temples. After that, many people began to convert to Islam. Muhammad traveled in a lot of different cities to talk about Allah. News of the death of his loved son Ibrahim greatly undermined the health of Muhammad. Anticipating his death, he decided to return to Mecca in order to pray one last time to Allah at the Kaaba. Upon learning of the intentions of the great prophet, approximately 10,000 of pilgrims expressed a desire to go with him to Mecca and listen to his sermons for the last time. The personal life of Muhammad. Muhammad married his first wife Khadijah, who gave him in marriage 6 babies. The Prophet loved her so much that he was faithful to her until death separated them. After the death of Khadijah, Muhammad also married several times, but not one of them was able to give birth to her husband's children. All the children that Muhammad had gave birth were to Khadijah. Unfortunately, almost all of the children died in infancy, and only one daughter, Fatima, survived her father for a year and a half. The death of the Prophet. Muhammad's health deteriorated sharply after the death of his son Ibrahim. Many historians believe the Prophet was sick with epilepsy, but despite this, he has up to the last kept a clear mind and memory. Muhammad died 8th June 632 at home. Male relatives washed his body and buried in the clothes that were on him at the time of death. The grave was dug in the house of the wife of Muhammad, Ayashi. Over time, a mosque was built at this place. And so that was a bit about the story of the life of Muhammad. Now I will talk a bit about the rise of Islam. and the Islamic Golden Age. So, the Golden Age of Islam. The Golden Age of Islam. The Abbasid caliphs established the city of Baghdad in 762 CE. It became a center of learning and a hub of what is known as the Golden Age of Islam. All right. Overview. After the death of Muhammad, Arab leaders were called caliphs. Caliphs built and established Baghdad as the hub of the Abbasid Caliphate, which is the third caliphate. The first was the Rashidun, the second was the Umayyad. Abbasid was the third. Baghdad was centrally located between Europe and Asia and was an important area for trade and exchanges of ideas. Scholars living in Baghdad translated Greek texts and made scientific discoveries, which is why this era, from the 7th to 13th centuries, is named the Golden Age of Islam. A love of knowledge was evident in Baghdad, established in 762 as the capital city of the Abbasid Caliphate in modern-day Iraq. Scholars, philosophers, doctors, and other thinkers all gathered in the center of trade and cultural development. Academics, many of them fluent in Greek and Arabic, exchanged ideas and translated Greek texts into Arabic. Chief Muslim leaders after Muhammad's death were referred to as the caliphs. The era of the Abbasid caliphs' construction and rule in Baghdad is known as the Golden Age of Islam. It was an era onto which scholarship thrived. Abbasid Caliphate. After the death of Muhammad and a relatively brief period of rule by the Rashidun caliphs, the Umayyad dynasty gained the reins of power. Based in Damascus, Syria, the Umayyad Caliphate faced internal pressures and resistance, partly because they displayed an obvious preference for Arab Muslims, excluding non-Arab Muslims like Persians. Taking advantage of this weakness, Sunni Arab Abu al-Abbas mounted a revolution in 750. With support from his followers, he destroyed the Umayyad troops in a massive battle and formed the Abbasid dynasty in its place. Baghdad. A map of the city of Baghdad. The leaders of the Abbasid dynasty built Baghdad, the capital of modern-day Iraq. Baghdad would come to replace and overshadow Damascus as the capital city of the empire. It was located near both the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, making it an ideal spot for food production that could sustain a large population. The Abbasids built Baghdad from scratch, while maintaining the network of roads and trade routes the Persians had established before the Umayyad dynasty took over. Baghdad was strategically located between Asia and Europe, which made it a prime spot on overland trade routes between the two continents. Some of the goods being traded through Baghdad were ivory, soap, honey, and diamonds. People in Baghdad made and exported silk, glass, tiles, and paper. The central location and lively trade culture of the city made a lively exchange of ideas possible as well. A map of the extent of the Abbasid dynasty from 750 to 1258. Baghdad attracted many people, including scholars, to live within its borders. To get a sense of what living in the newly constructed city was like, here's an excerpt from the writings of Arab historian and biographer Yaqut al-Hamawi, describing Baghdad in the 10th century. The city of Baghdad formed two vast semicircles on the right and left banks of the Tigris, 12 miles in diameter. The numerous suburbs covered with parks, gardens, villas, and beautiful promenades, and plentifully supplied with rich bazaars and finely built mosques and baths, stretched for a considerable distance on both sides of the river. In the days of its prosperity, the population of Baghdad and its suburbs amounted to over 2 million. The palace of the Caliph stood in the midst of a vast park, several hours in circumference, which beside a menagerie and aviary comprised an enclosure for wild animals reserved for the chase. The palace grounds were laid out with gardens and adorned with exquisite taste with plants, flowers, and trees, reservoirs and fountains, surrounded by sculpted figures. On this side of the river stood the palaces of the great nobles. Immense streets, none less than 40 cubits wide, traversed the city from one end to the other, dividing it into blocks or quarters, each under the control of an overseer or supervisor, who looked after the cleanliness, sanitation, and the comfort of the inhabitants. 10th century historian Yaqut al-Hamawi, from Lost History, pages 60 to 61. Pursuit of knowledge. Abbasid caliphs Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Mamun, who followed him, established a house of wisdom in Baghdad, a dedicated space for scholarship. The house of wisdom increased in use and prestige under al-Mamun's rule from 813 to 833. He made a special effort to recruit famous scholars to come to the House of Wisdom. Muslims, Christians, and Jews all collaborated and worked peacefully there. Scholars at an Abbasid library. The translation movement. Caliphs like al-Rashid and al-Mamun directly encouraged a translation movement, a formal translation of scholarly works from Greek into Arabic. The Abbasid rulers wanted to make Greek texts, such as Aristotle's works, available to the Arab world. Their goal was to translate as many of these famous works as possible in order to have a comprehensive library of knowledge and to preserve the philosophies and scholarship of Greece. The Abbasids aimed to have philosophy, science and medicine texts translated, in addition to Arab Muslim scholars. Syrian Christians translated Syriac texts into Arabic as well. Why were the Abbasids so interested in a massive translation undertaking? In addition to their desire to have a comprehensive library of knowledge and the Quran's emphasis on learning as a holy activity, they also had a practical thirst for medical knowledge. The dynasty was facing a demand for skilled doctors, so having so much knowledge as possible for them to access was a must. One way the Abbasid dynasty was able to spread written knowledge so quickly was their improvements on printing technology they had obtained from the Chinese. Some historians believe this technology was taken after the Battle of Talis between the Abbasid Caliphate and the Tang dynasty in 751. The Chinese had guarded paper making as a secret, but when the Tang lost the battle, the Abbasids captured knowledgeable paper makers as prisoners of war, forcing them to reproduce their craft. In China, paper making was a practice reserved for elites, but the Arabs learned how to produce texts on a larger scale, establishing paper mills which made books more accessible. In turn, Europeans eventually learned these paper making and producing skills from Arabs in Al-Andalus. Bust of Aristotle. Abbasid advances. During the Golden Age of Islam, Arab and Persian scholars, as well as scholars from other countries, were able to build on the information they translated from the Greeks and others from the Abbasid dynasty and forge new advances in their fields. Aban al-Hathim invented the first camera and was able to form an explanation of how the eye sees. Doctor and philosopher Avicenna wrote the Canon of Medicine, which helped physicians diagnose dangerous diseases such as cancer. And Al-Khwarizmi a Persian mathematician, invented algebra, a word which itself has Arabic roots. Portrait of Al-Khwarizmi. Summary. Scholars living in Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate contributed to the preservation of Greek and other existing knowledge about philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and many other disciplines. In addition to preserving information, these scholars contributed new insights in their fields and ultimately passed their discoveries along to Al-Andalus and eventually to Italy and ultimately to Europe. What was the Umayyad Caliphate? The Umayyad Caliphate was the second of four Islamic caliphates and was founded in Arabia after the Prophet Muhammad's death. The Umayyads ruled the Islamic world from 661 to 750. Their capital was in the city of Damascus. The founder of the caliphate, Muawiyah Aban Abi Sufyan, had long been the governor of Syria. originally from Mecca. Muawiyah named his dynasty the sons of Umayyah, after a common ancestor he shared with the Prophet Muhammad. The Umayyad family had been one of the major combatant clans in the Battle of Badr, 624, the decisive battle between Muhammad and his followers on the one hand, and the powerful clans of Mecca on the other. Muawiyah triumphed over Ali, the fourth caliph, and Muhammad's son-in-law in 661, and officially founded the new caliphate. The Umayyad Caliphate became one of the major political, cultural, and scientific centers of the early medieval world. The Umayyads also began the process of spreading Islam throughout Asia, Africa, and Europe. They moved into Persia and Central Asia, converting the rulers of key Silk Road oases cities such as Merv and Sistan. They also invaded what is now Pakistan, beginning the process of conversion in that area that would continue for centuries. Umayyad troops also crossed Egypt and brought Islam to the Mediterranean coast of Africa, from whence it would disperse south across the Sahara along caravan routes until much of West Africa became Muslim. Finally, the Umayyads waged a series of wars against the Byzantine Empire, based in what is now Istanbul. They sought to overthrow this Christian empire in Anatolia and convert the region to Islam. Anatolia would eventually convert, but not for several centuries after the collapse of the Umayyad dynasty in Asia. Between 685 and 705, the Umayyad Caliphate reached its apex of power and prestige. Its armies conquered areas from Spain in the west to Sindh in what is now India, to Sindh in what is now India. One after another, additional Central Asian cities fell to the Muslim armies: Bukhara, Samarkand, Khawarizm, Tashkent, and Fergana. This rapidly expanding empire had a postal system, a form of banking based on credit, some of the most beautiful architecture ever seen. Just when it seemed that the Umayyads truly were poised to rule the world, however, disaster struck. In 717, the Byzantine Emperor Leo III led his army to a crushing victory over the Umayyad forces, which had been besieging Constantinople. After 12 months trying to break through the city's defenses, the hungry and exhausted Umayyads had to retreat empty-handed back to Syria. A new caliph, Umar II, tried to reform the financial system of the caliphate by increasing the taxes on Arab Muslims to the same level as taxes of all other non-Arab Muslims. This caused a huge outcry among the Arab faithful, of course, and caused a financial crisis when they refused to pay any taxes at all. Finally, renewed feuding broke out among the various Arab tribes around this time, leaving the Umayyad system tottering. It managed to press on for a few more decades. Umayyad armies got as far into Western Europe as France, by 732, where they were turned back at the Battle of Tours. In 740, the Byzantines dealt the Umayyads another shattering blow, driving all Arabs from Anatolia. 5 years later, the simmering feuds between the Khwaz and Kalbe tribes of Arabs erupted into full-scale war in Syria and Iraq. In 749, religious leaders proclaimed a new caliph, Abu al-Abbas al-Satha, who became the founder of the Abbasid Caliphate. Under the new caliph, members of the old ruling family were hunted down and executed. One survivor, Abd ar-Rahman, escaped to Al-Andalus, Spain, where he founded the Emirate and later Caliphate of Cordoba. The Umayyad Caliphate in Spain survived until 1031. And this is Marco Brevio, one of the places built during the Umayyad Caliphate. These Islamic empires were extremely urbanized, extremely advanced, and extremely well educated, and very much highly articulate peoples. The Islamic Golden Age lasted from the 8th century to the 13th century. It came to an end with the when the Mongols invaded and sacked Baghdad in 1250 something, I think 1253. So in 1253, Baghdad was sacked and ravaged up by the Mongols. That was the end of what was left of the Abbasids, and that was also the end of the Seljuk Turks and the end of the Islamic Golden Age in the 13th century. Also, by then, universities had sprung up in Siena, in Rome, in Florence, in Paris, a little bit later in London. Al-Andalus also had universities, but by the time that the Golden Age of Islam came to an end, universities and collegiums were already reviving in Europe. And very slowly, but very gradually, Europe climbed out of the so-called Dark Ages. And by the time of 1000 AD, this period known as the Dark Ages was over. All right, so Interdimensional Lizard says, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I guess that means hello in Arabic. Total Jenny Depp says, I am still a hard man. Total Jenny Depp says, can you unban Bronx Beats, please? He said that he is sorry. No, I'm not going to. Lost Soul says, Allah Akbar. 2 bombs, a plane, and the Twin Towers. Lost Soul says Soul Breaker and Souls 2 Breaker 2 got banned. I'm sorry to hear that, bro. What happened, man? What exactly happened? Frisk says, what is he babbling about now? Your mom. That's what I'm babbling about. Your mom and these nuts. Lost Soul says Arabia. Yeah, tradition says that Muhammad came from Arabia. However, more recent archaeological research seems to suggest that he probably came from somewhere closer to Mesopotamia. Probably Kuwait, somewhere like about around Kuwait or Qatar. Qatar. Frisk says, bro, stick to drama. Lost Soul says, like and subscribe. Yeah, thank you. Please like this video and please subscribe. There will be a lot more later. Frisk says, Bronxy. Frisk says, Bronxy. Frisk says, free my man. He ain't done nothing. All right. When I can see him posting in Ghost of Nicolo's chat, and I can see him posting in 3/4's chat and Drunken Surfer's chat, then I'll change my mind. Until then, I'm not going to change nothing. Lost Soul says, don't know how long accounts can survive. So I won't upload videos from now on. Oh, I didn't know that you were uploading videos. Just upload videos on Rumble. Make an account on Rumble and upload your videos there. You won't get banned. Lost Soul says, thanks for giving me mod. Yeah, you're welcome. Lost Soul says, do you have a Discord? When I clicked the last link, it said it was expired. Well, I don't know if you're going to enjoy getting into my Discord. I mean, it's mostly just a bunch of drama. I don't even use Discord, bro. My Discord has pretty much lost its purpose. All it is just Ghost of Nicolo or Omerta, and then sometimes Jay Danks and Swede and some other guys will post in there. But yeah, I'll give you my link. There you go. Okay, there's the link to my Discord right there. If you want to join. Okay, Total Jenny Depp says, join the Forge. Yes, join Forge gang. Mormon Shaggy, you will become Forge gang. Mormon Shaggy will give in to the inevitability of being absorbed into Forge. All shall be Forge. All shall be a Forge. I'm just kidding. Lost Soul says, how? Total Jenny Depp says, do your part to serve the greater good. Warhammer 40K. Lost Soul says, okay. Total Jenny Death, I don't know. I'm not in his server, LOL. You didn't miss anything, Total Jenny Death. All it is some plate, just some former old plate gang people, some people from the J-Danks army, some people from PPP and Surfer's old group, and people from all over the place. It's not like my server is just full of only those people. It's just that those type of people are usually the ones that post. There's other people from all over, including people that watch my stuff. Lost Soul falls asleep. Oh, did I bore you to sleep, bro? Code of Truth says Forge Gang now has 1 million views. That's true. Code of Truth says, eat that, sectards. Eat that. Elaine Miller, what do you think of that? Lost Soul says, win. Total Jenny Depp says, win for Forge. Code of Truth says, peace be with the prophet. Yeah, well, I don't think Muhammad was a real prophet of God, but his movement and the empires or the states that they led to contributed to the development of Europe going into the medieval era. Code of Truth says, Allah is great. Lost Souls says, bombs, Twin Towers, airplanes ramming into the New York skyline, and Islamic prayers. Code of Truth says, Allah is the most merciful and beneficent, peace to be upon him. Allah, the most merciful and beneficent, peace be upon him. Code of Truth says, war is peace. Allah is great. That is just so Orwellian, Code of Truth. Lost Soul says, Mashallah, Islamic prayer hands and the Kaaba and the black stone of the Kaaba in Mecca. Code of Truth says, Islama makum sadiq. Code of Truth says, black cube, peace be upon it. Lost Soul says, peace to the Prophet's family. And shows that it endorses multiculturalism. Code of Truth says, yes, no one shall judge his choice of wife. Oh yeah, I mean, never mind that Aisha was like 9 years old. Supposedly. Code of Truth says, haram be upon who that does. Lost Soul says, we cooking, LOL. Lost Soul says, Allah may protect me from the devil. I doubt that. Vishtusp says, read Tabari history. It's really useful and changes anyone's perspective and mind. Okay. Are you talking about Al-Tabari, the philosopher? Lost Soul asks who Tabari is. Average Roman win. Hate speech, but it was bullshit. Oh yeah, dude, it happens so often. I get so fucking sick of it too. Thankfully, for the last couple of years, I haven't had issues, but I've had to like really lighten up a lot of things. Lost Soul says special for 2. I don't use Telegram that much, but I'll go ahead and create one. All right, there you go. I've got a how do I add people into my group? Yeah, okay, I just made a Forge gang on Telegram. But I don't know how to add people into Telegram. I don't know how to add people onto Telegram. There's my Discord. Lost Soul says, thanks. Lost Soul says, back. Lost Soul says, don't worry, bro. All right, so, yeah, I just wanted to really quickly go over, just wanted really quickly to go over some stuff of the Islamic Golden Age. So, when Alexander the Great conquered Persia, it made the West, that is Europe, to rise and star over Asia. And so for most of Greek and Roman history after that, it was the West that tended to outshine the East. That isn't to say that cultures in the East were not any good. But with the fall of Rome and the rise of Islam, once more, we go back into a loop before the change that happened with Alexander the Great, in the sense that now it is the East that is outshining the West. And for a very long time afterwards, it will take a tremendous amount of energy and a very long time beginning with the Crusades, before Europe ever comes even remotely close to what these Eastern cultures are able to achieve. Thank you for coming with me on this journey, and come back and watch next time on Forge Gang Radio. Hope you enjoyed my going through the life of Muhammad, the Rushuddin, Umayyad, and Abbasid Caliphates. I'll see you next time. Peace.